In the last video, I went over the Xeno series' beginnings as a rejected Final Fantasy script. At the turn of the millennium, Tetsuya Takahashi was now the head of his own game studio, along with several former Square staff, and they all had one mission in mind: to create a brand new Xeno game to follow up Xenogears, without the influence of Square. This new game would mimic Xenogears in story and gameplay, but be set in a brand new universe with a brand new set of characters. To bring this new project to life, Monolithsofts needed a publisher to help fund and market the game. They would eventually team up with Namco, who offered to help fund and publish the game, whilst allowing Monolithsofts to function independently as a studio. And thus, in 2002, Xenosaga Episode 1, Duili Zu March, was released on the PlayStation 2. Unlike Xenogears, which took place entirely on a single planet, Xenosaga would be primarily set in outer space, in a universe where humanity has left Earth and now lives amongst the stars, but now faces total annihilation from a hostile alien species known as the Gnosis. In an attempt to save humanity, the scientist Shion Uzuki builds a combat android known as Cosmos to fight the aliens. The first game follows Shion and Cosmos as they make their way to the planet's second militia, meeting a strange cast of characters along the way who help them fight the Gnosis and a fanatical terrorist group known as UTIC. Gameplay is very similar to Xenogears, using a similar combo system which can now be chained into custom special attacks. Along with this, mech combat has been toned down, and they can no longer be piloted outside of battle. Another difference is the overworld, in which Xenosaga doesn't have one. Instead, you can enter a simulator to bring up previously visited areas in the game. As a result, Xenosaga is highly linear and can sometimes feel like a movie with some cutscenes going over 30 minutes long. Xenosaga would come out to decent reception, but would fall behind Xenogears in both reviews and sales, only selling around 1 million copies. Despite this, the game was considered a success, and with a deal with Namco to make at least 3 Xenosaga games, a sequel was put straight into the works. Along with this, Monolithsofts began to work with Namco on other projects, such as the Biden Kaitos duology on the GameCube, as well as a small spin-off known as Xenosaga Freaks on the PlayStation 2. In 2004, the anticipated sequel for Xenosaga Episode 1 was released under the name Xenosaga Episode 2, Jensenz von Gut an Bois. For those curious, the names reference stories by Francis Wilhelm, whose narratives influenced the themes of the games. Xenosaga 2 follows directly on from Episode 1, focusing on the cast stopping UTIC gaining powerful artifacts, as well as giving more of the backstory on several of the cast members. The gameplay was very similar to Episode 1, but now had separate mech sections, as well as positioning mechanics in the battles, where being behind the enemy allowed for stronger attacks, a mechanic that would later return in the Xenoblade games. Despite receiving mostly positive reviews, Xenosaga Episode 2 was panned by a lot of fans from the first game due to changes in its art style and story choices. The game was also practically unplayable to anyone new to the series, with heavy reliance on the previous game's story. So this was the perfect game to bring over to the PAL region and introduce Australians to the Xeno series. I still have no idea what they were thinking. The result was another drop-off in sales, making Xenosaga Episode 2 the first main series Xeno game to sell under 1 million copies, despite the expanded market. Despite a hit in sales, Monolithsofts hit its peak with Namco in 2004, releasing a Xenosaga game for the mobile phones, focusing on the backstory of certain characters in Xenosaga 1 and 2. We also saw the first Xeno game on a Nintendo system, with Xenosaga Episode 1 and 2, a retelling of the first 2 Xeno games on the DS. Namco also tasked Monolithsofts with a crossover project with Capcom, known as Namco Cross Capcom, which starred popular game characters such as Klonoa, Heihachi, Ryu, and Mega Man in an SRPG mashup. Along with this, Monolithsofts also put some of their own characters in, including Shion and Cosmos. Despite building a reputation within, Monolithsofts found their relationship with the now merged Bandai Namco decaying. Pressure from the publisher was resulting in rushed games, and when it finally came to the release of the much anticipated Xenosaga Episode 3, it was clear that this would be the last game in the series. Despite being planned as a 6-part story, Xenosaga's poor sales had killed the franchise. Xenosaga Episode 3, also Sprach Zarathustra, is set a couple of years after the events of Episode 2, where we find Shion going solo to track down a dark secret left by her father, in a journey that takes her and the rest of the cast back in time to learn the truth about the Gnosis. Gameplay was more like a traditional RPG, no longer having the combo system despite being a series staple up until that point. The game also saw a decline in its cinematic aspects, with large cutscenes being relegated to text box exchanges. Despite this, the game delivered a great story with robust gameplay, and was the best send-off the series could receive. However, with the sales only cracking just over 250,000, the series was dead, and it seemed like Takahashi's dream of a deep story-driven JRPG with complex ideas and themes was to die along with it. But hope came in 2007, when a new publisher entered the fray. This company would buy up Monolithsofts' shares from Bandi Namco and put them to work on their 2 brand new consoles, making some brand new stealth RPGs, as well as a big series revival for the Xeno brand, which I will cover in the last part of this series, as I go over the history of the Xenoblade Chronicles franchise.